everyone. My name is Duncan. I'm a professional MBA student here at Bentley, and I'll be presenting on Recalibrate. Deja vu is fun in movies. In teams, it becomes expensive. The same mistakes show up over again because lessons don't get documented and they don't turn into reusable playbooks. It's not because people don't care, but it doesn't become something reusable. And the decisions that people end up making end up vanishing after the moment. That's where Recalibrate comes in. So tonight I'm going to walk you through the build story of the problem, my approach to building the solution in anti-gravity, the proof, what broke, what I learned, and the impact. So the problem. Great teams still repeat the same mistakes. People that are making decisions end up getting some of those logics lost either in their head when they leave, when they graduate, or it's lost in chats. And so the result is new people end up repeating old errors and rework becomes normal. So there are several costs associated with this that leads to slower learning, and Recalibrate aims to help solve that. So the challenge. One reviewer framed the challenge perfectly well. They said people don't want to document errors. And there are several frictions at play here. One is the friction of time. It takes too much time to enter information when there are multiple fields. Additionally, there's an emotional aspect. When people make a mistake, they may not be apt to document it or want to admit that they made an error. And then there's also the time element. If there's no immediate payoff, then people are less likely to document that mistake. So the design principle was simple. Make the capture fast, and make the reflection feel valuable. That way people are more likely to use it and it becomes sticky. So the idea here is to turn decisions into institutional memory. So first, the decision is captured quickly, very low friction. You can even use voice to record the decision. Then the outcome, that's the real proof or the real lessons that people are learning from the decision that was made. And from the decisions, you go to guardrails. So these are things that are constraints or checklists to make sure that you don't repeat the same mistake. And you make those into playbooks. So this is something that ends up being repeatable, and you can recall it when you face another scenario that's similar. So this is built as one engine with two separate dashboards. There's a company mode and there's a personal mode. So here I'm going to walk you through the company mode dashboard. So here we see there are different domains that you can focus on for a company, strategy and the like. And on the left side here is the decision log. So here is where you can capture all the decisions that you're making and the outcomes, if it was a success or if it was a failure. And this is the dialogue for the logging decisions. Here are the playbooks. So you can create a playbook, or teams can have shared playbooks so that they're not creating it from scratch and they're able to reuse what is already learned from prior lessons. Here is a personal dashboard. So one thing to note is it's the same engine, but the personal dashboard adds a layer of reflection without extra work. So here you'll see the domains are tied to things like learning, health and habits, and even work and career. On the left side, you can document life lessons, so you can go back and remember things that you wanted to jot down for the future. And you also have playbooks that you can use based on the lessons you've learned as well. And here is an example of lessons becoming a safeguard. So when you log a decision, you'll get a memo that highlights what the decision was, what the outcome was, and any things to consider. So if there were any options you considered, if there are any follow-up next steps, that all gets documented here. And here we're seeing the lessons that you're capturing from different decisions that were made. You can easily edit the lessons for the main takeaways and the concepts there. And the most important part here is the guardrails. So the guardrails are rules-based that help you avoid repeating the same mistake. So you have soft, firm, and hard rules that you can embed to make sure when you encounter a similar situation, you're making sure you're reflecting on these different guardrails before proceeding and making a similar mistake again. So the builder story, how did I build this? So I used Google's anti-gravity. I don't have any coding background, but I was able to get a first draft built very quickly. And to the right here, when I was working on the project for the Mastering AI class, so this shows a log of 35 examples of issues I ran into in troubleshooting while building the program. So what you'll see is using anti-gravity or vibe coding, I needed to test buttons over and over again to make sure they were doing what they needed to do. I also took screenshots and leveraged ChatGPT when I found an error in a workflow or something wasn't working correctly to give me a prompt to fix it in anti-gravity. And I also used Titan prompts as constraints to make sure that I was building what I intended to. And I kept reiterating over and over again until I got the outcome I was looking for. So what did I learn? So from this exercise, I learned that AI accelerates drafts and not truth. So what do I mean by that? Validation beats confidence. Each time I would put something into anti-gravity and I would get an output, I needed to make sure that that button was actually clickable, that the workflow was actually doing what I intended it to do. I also learned that constraints prevent regressions. So as I was iterating and adding more features and functionality, I found that certain things were breaking. And I had to use prompts specifically not to break certain things. And lastly, friction decides adoption. So the capture must be fast and quick for people to use it and for it to feel worthwhile. So for next steps, there are multiple paths to go with Recalibate, both on the B2B and on the personal side. I plan on running some pilots with some individuals to see if it actually helps them prevent repeat mistakes and to leverage Bentley's eHub to iterate further and explore more. Thank you.
Josh.
So really cool idea. I guess one question is, since in the real world decisions and outcomes are kind of messier than than you'd like them to be, so just being able to kind of get an outcome and then plug that in. So how do you deal with like outcomes that might happen like, in 10 minutes versus like 10 days, or outcomes that kind of change over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I think for this concept, it would be isolating what stage it is. So I didn't get through it all the time, but we also have a triage that shows the most sensitive decision. And so there would be an audit log that shows where the problem lies and how far it's being moved along to reflect on if the decision ended up making a good outcome. And you can take those lessons and apply it to the next scenario.
Joyce?
Yes, this is just a comment. My husband and I worked with startup companies over many years, and out of, say, 20 companies, 16 of them failed. And the thing that got to me is when you said people don't like to document their mistakes. And one of the things I've meticulously done is kept all the documentation of the companies that did not make it. And so this is something that's very interesting to me that I'd like to explore. Because the one thing I found is the ones that didn't make it were always making the same mistakes.